The commission meeting of the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission will come back to order. Commission recognizes Chairman David Watson. He's chair of the Budget Committee. Chairman Watson, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Frank Frist to come to the podium.
Chairman Watson, we're asking to expand the budget for Project 7309 in the amount of $171,600 for a grant that we received from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to monitor the relative abundance, movement, and reproduction of Asian carp in Kentucky, Barkley, and in Tennessee. So we're pretty excited about having this money that will be matched by the university for almost all but $3,000 of it is matched through the university. So we're excited to have this opportunity to have benchmarks so that we can tell when we have strategies to control carp that we know we're making an impact. We'll be able to measure whether there's more or less of them over time, and we'll also be able to use the information we get from the movement data and the abundance data to inform our strategies as we decide where to spend the next bit of money we might get to control carp. So that's our interest.
Is there any discussion from the committee? Any discussion from the public? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All for it, say aye. Aye. All nay? Against it? Nay? Okay. So it passes. Thank you. I'd like to call Tim Churchill, Chief of Real Estate Division.
While Tim's coming up, Frank, do you think this study, the results of this study, might give the Fish and Wildlife Service the ammunition to get more budgeted money to try to help us with the carp? Is that kind of what they're trying to do?
Anytime you work with the Fish and Wildlife Service, they want accountability and monitoring. So I feel like this is an important first step. So we got our act together, knowing how many fish there are as we go forward. When we come back and ask for money for barriers or removal projects or whatever that is, they're going to always require that we're monitoring our success. So this is like a foundational thing that we're getting. We expect to get that money again next year. That's my plan, and we'll be able to do different things with it. The reason we're getting more money is because the MICRA, Mississippi Interstate Cooperative, has been going to D.C. and lobbying to get more attention to the southeast for these species. And our assistant director, Bobby Wilson's been successful in doing that, and we hope to continue that effort as well.
We can involve our commercial fishermen in taking those out.
It will involve anyone that wants to participate.
Okay, I have two budget expansions, both for land. These are 100% federal projects, PR projects. The first one is for around 1,300 acres at Bear Hollow Mountain Wildlife Management Area. It's sort of located between the north and south components, and it's adjacent to a tract we bought last year called Pump Log Hollow. You can see on the map the red outline is the Narrows tract, and this is the one we want to buy. It's coming from the Nature Conservancy. They're wanting to sell to us at half price, so it's a rather large discount sale. And the non-federal match portion for the purchase will come from the bargain sale. You want to consider these one at a time, or do you want to take them both together? I can show you the other one. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move passage of the budget expansion for the Narrows track.
Okay. Is there any questions from the public? Any from the committee? Okay, all for it say aye. Aye. All against say nay. Okay, it passes.
Thank you. The second tract is much smaller tract, only 20 acres. It's at Mount Roosevelt, WMA in Roane County. We're asking for $30,000 to purchase it. You can see that it's sort of moving towards a connection between two pretty large components of this wildlife management area, and it'll, you know, if we can ultimately close that gap, it'll make it all the easier for hunters to hunt along the ridge top there. So this is, again, 100% federal money. The match will come from the Conservation Fund, who will sell that tract at a 25% discount to make the non-federal match.
Do I hear a motion?
I move approval of the Mount Roosevelt, Foster Track at Mount Roosevelt.
Okay, got a second for Commissioner Swan. Okay, do I hear any discussion from the committee? Any discussions or questions from the public? Okay, all for it, say aye. Anyone against, say nay. Okay, passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This time, we'd like to call Kate Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The TWRA Boating and Law Enforcement Division requests to expand the boating and law enforcement budget by $468,800 for the Clean Vessel Act grant program. This money will be 100% federal money to be used for construction, renovation, maintenance of pump out stations at marinas throughout the state of Tennessee. These match dollars will be provided by the Clean Vessel Act grant recipients.
Do I hear a motion to approve? Okay, second? Okay. Any discussion or questions from the committee? Any from the public? All for it, say aye. Any against, nay. Okay, passes. Thank you, Kate. I'd like to call Tim Churchill back again to give the real estate report.
Thank you, Commissioner Watson. I haven't done one of these since we were at AEDC, so it's been, oh shoot, I lost it. There's been quite a lot of activity in terms of what we've got closed in the last few months. Most of that is in your booklets. There's a list of what is closed, and whatever is closed will come off that list after this meeting. But I'm just going to go through my summary maps here to talk about a little bit what we've got finished. And you can see in Region 1, we've closed, if you look down on the Wolf River, the bottom of the map, we've closed a tract called Simonton that was less than 100 acres. Cox Tract as well, closed. Middle Fork, Fork of Deer up near Jackson, closed. And then the Buffalo Ridge Refuge, which we just passed, which just had, Mark just discussed a little bit ago, and had hunting rigs for. There's not as much going on in sort of the middle part of the state. We did close one up at Cedar Hill Swamp in the north. You see the north one up there. Raccoody is up at Cedar Hill Swamp, WMA, and a very small tract at Yanali, Battersby Tract. Also, I'm trying to read this, Keeble Tract, which was that was about 700 acres, closed like a week ago, and that's also an additive tract to Bear Hollow Mountain, so we're really glad to get that one completed. A few up here in Region 3, the Sherwood Tract, which was up on Blackburn Fork, WMA, is that correct? Blackburn Fork. The McCart Tract, which was 1,700 acres, closed yesterday. The Cunningham Tract, which was an addition at Scotts Gulf, closed. It was a fairly large amount of acreage as well, so we've We've added a lot of hunting land, particularly in Region 3 in the last few months. Moving over to Region 4, we've closed Gunsight Mountain. That was like 1,200 acres, I believe, and that was up in the North Cumberlands. Also Mount McLeod, which is a small tract, 100 acres or so in the Northern Cumberlands. John Sevier shooting range was finally transferred from the U.S. Army to us. That didn't cost us anything. Taylor Tract, which was over near Douglas Lake. Trying to remember the name of that wetland down there. Rankin Bottom, thank you, sir. Got that one closed, and we're still working on Orchard Bog up in the northeast corner. That's what I got, and if you got any questions about those, I'm happy to take them.
Is there any questions from the committee? Any questions from the public? Okay. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that is, hang on.
That wraps up your part, I believe.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Chairman Watson, thank you so much. Commission recognizes Jim Ripley, Chair of the Audit Committee. Commissioner Ripley, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Audit Committee recognizes Barry Sumner as Assistant Director.
Thank you. You will notice your agenda says upcoming audit, and that's pretty much the extent of my message for you, is that it is time for us to undergo another sunset audit. So we've had one meeting with the auditors, and they've asked for some documents. They told us they would probably be moving into our building next month. This will be an audit of both the agency and the commission, so sometime over the next several months, it's likely that you may get a phone call from someone identifying themselves as a performance auditor or a sunset auditor. And so I wanted you to be aware of that. Also, among the documents that they asked for was the conflict of interest forms signed by commissioners. My first thought was, okay, we've got that. But when I started looking, I realized those are annual forms, and we are not currently in compliance. So I put a conflict of interest form in front of each of you there, and it would help us all out some if you could look through that and sign the last page and get that back to us. Are there any questions?
Barry, I'm not sure if I'm asking something that's appropriate, and I'm going to look to legal on this as well. The commissioners get calls from various people throughout the week on a number of items, and if there's any way that the folks who are doing the audit could let us know who would be calling us, if they're going to be calling us, just so that we know that it is a legitimate sanctioned call, if you will, as part of this audit, as part of some random unofficial call.
We're trying to work that out with them.
Is that, Tracy, is that acceptable? Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commission? From the members of the audience? All right, hearing none, Mr. Chairman, that would conclude the Audit Committee meeting.
Chairman Ripley, I thank you. Is there any other committee business that needs to come before this body today? I see that hand, Director Carter. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really not, excuse me, a particular committee item, so I don't want to get in the middle of that, but since we're doing okay on time, if you don't mind, I'd like to take about 10 minutes and let you know what happened to our Association Fish and Wildlife Agency meetings and a couple other comments, so whenever that's appropriate.
I think now's appropriate. We are very pushed for time, as you can tell. I mean, we're running at what? My goodness, 2:37, and we're usually at about, this is a record, so. There you go. Thank you, Commissioner T. Go ahead, Ed.
First of all, let me mention just a couple of things about the audit, and Barry has told you all the media parts of that. Our first meeting, as y'all might remember, relating back to the budget, we asked him, we said, what's this audit going to cost us? Because if you remember the last audit, when they came in, they charged us over $1 million for our audit to go through the sunset, which caught us all by surprise and way over what we were expecting. They said, well, we don't really have a price. We can't really give you that, but we will try to find out what kind of ballpark figure that you can expect. So just wanted to put that on record. We don't know what that's going to be yet, but I hope that it won't be as much as the other one. And technically speaking, this is a sunset audit of the commission and not the agency. But they consider them as one. So even and if they were to sunset the commission, essentially the agency is sunset as well, because we can't do anything without the policies, procedures, and everything that's lined up under the regulations that the commission has the only authority to pass. The only regulations that the director of an agency has relates to personnel. And in any case, just a couple of things about that I thought you might want to know. And we most definitely will try to let you know who the auditors are that might be calling. The other thing is, we talked about the Beasley property a second ago. I just want to mention one other thing. I'll start off with an apology. We offered names to people who might want to be invited to come to the little celebration. We had the ribbon cutting about a week ago, and I'm not sure any of y'all got the invitations until like the night before. I just want you to know that wasn't by design. It was completely somewhere a breakdown between the folks sending out the information and us, and I don't know where that was, but I apologize. But I will tell you that it was a great little afternoon. Tom Beasley and Wendy Beasley came, and we had probably 25 people who showed up to be a part of that. They undersold the property at a great discount. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to buy it. And they made the match for us, so we tied up no agency license dollars in it. But it's about 1,800 acres. It's going to be, by Tom and Wendy's desire, outreach, education, and so forth that has been going on for about 20 years. Tom's pretty much turned that property over to us that long ago, and now it's official. I also wanted to throw that at this AFWA meeting, which I'm kind of moving into, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies meetings. The 3 R's, it's kind of the buzzword going around now: recruitment, reactivation, and what's the one I'm missing? What? Retention.
That
started
refers
to say
to
something
trying to
there, but that's-
retain what you were talking about at the meeting. It's called retention, you remembering. But anyway, go ahead, Ed. Thank you.
I wasn't good in the 3 R's even in school, much less. But these 3 R's, recruitment, reactivation, retention, as relates to people who are in the outdoors. And in almost every major organization is involved in that, from all the ones you would know, from Ducks Unlimited to the Elk Foundation to the Turkey Federation, on and on. That's a big part that they're moving forward on. And that will fit into the Beasley property for sure. But let me just run through a list. I'll try to supply any details you might want to have, as much as I can tell you. I think there's about 3 things related to finances that I want to put out for. And I guess to back up for a second, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies is made up of the Canadian provinces, the U.S., parts of Mexico, and all the U.S. territories. We meet twice a year. I just got home last night from our annual meeting, and this is the one where we have our business part, and it goes forward with resolutions and work a lot through its Fish and Wildlife Service and all the other federal agencies on both the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Interior. But in any case, the ones that I think you might want to know about, there's a bill that has been introduced in Congress, and I'll be checking back with you all. Chris and I are working on some information for you to ask that as much as we can, we support that legislation through our congressional delegation. It doesn't change the amount of money coming into our PR programs, the Pittman-Robertson Wildlife Restoration Funds, but it gives us greater leeway on how it could be spent for recruitment, reactivation, and retention, and something that we would be able to utilize now that we can't. So everybody that in the wildlife circles are all very much in favor of that. But it's like anything else, we're going through a presidential election. We don't know exactly where it will bog down or not, but there are several things in that bill that would be a great benefit to us. The other thing is that we've mentioned the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations. That's the money that would come off of offshore leases that would go back into essentially whatever it takes for a state to meet the desires of their state wildlife action plan, which predominantly is non-game and endangered species. It would mean about $1.3 billion set aside nationally that would be coming back to the states, and for us that would mean about $22 million. Some of the provisions of that I think are very important to us right now is that there's an enforcement component in it. Right now, any enforcement work that we do is all state dollars, except in boating, where we get some federal match from the Coast Guard. But on the wildlife side, enforcement's not an eligible activity except under some really rare circumstances. Under the one that's going forward, there's an enforcement side that would mean any time our enforcement personnel are working on endangered species, non-game species, any of those things that we do on a regular basis, we would be eligible for at least 75% reimbursement, which would obviously help the bottom line and when we're looking at license sales and license recruitment. They're looking for people to sign on as sponsors. They're looking primarily right now for a Western senator, but they're really looking at one of the Tennessee senators as well, because of a lot of the involvement that some of our senators have had nationally when it comes to wildlife, and especially this kind of funding. It falls into the Land and Water Conservation Fund as well, which causes it to be a little dicey at places, but I think we will probably be moving toward that and asking you all support in that as well. About a month ago, 125 countries met with 9,000 people in attendance to talk about the use of lead in the outdoors. This has been an ongoing thing for years. It started out as, obviously, you remember back in waterfowl when we went from lead to steel shot. There's a significant movement to remove it from all fishing as well, so there's no lead components in sinkers and lures and those kind of things. The U.S. was a party to that, didn't push for the ban on lead in several of the places that was asked, but I will tell you that of the 9,000 people in attendance, 92% of those people voted to ban lead entirely from the outdoors as much as it can be done. There's every other year, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species takes place. And again, it's about, depending on the year, 120 to 190 countries get together and talk about what can be imported to the United States, exported, what kind of parts and stuff. So for the first year in a while, we don't know of anything controversial that will be coming up that's going to be affecting the U.S. I asked specifically about paddlefish and sturgeon, and there's nothing on the agenda that would say that there's anything that's going to happen that would impact the paddlefish fishery in the state of Tennessee or, in fact, in the United States, but we don't know until we get there. Y'all have been hearing from people about buzzards as it relates to agriculture and some of the depredation problems that they have, especially with cattle. There's also, of course, the cormorant problem that we noticed on several of the lakes. There's actually movement, and Joe Benedict and Gray Anderson from both sides of the agency in terms of non-game and also on the hunting side of waterfowl. Both are engaged at the Flyway Council, and at this meeting we just left, there was actually movement by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to move forward as quickly as they could inside that council to give the states greater leeway in controlling both of those birds, which is good news to a lot of us. There's been a significant amount of tension between the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and the 50 states and territories. The association entered into an amicus brief with other states as it related to the state of Alaska and what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is pushing forward in terms of changes inside the National Wildlife Refuge, which impacts the state of Alaska in a way that goes against state law. So that's moving forward. Yesterday, another one was voted to go forward against taking up a charge against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for releasing of, in this case, wolves in New Mexico, which was prohibited by state law and also by a request from the state of New Mexico, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that not happen, but it did. And so now the state of New Mexico is filing suit, and the 50 states essentially have signed on to that. I'm just rambling on here, so whenever I get the look, I'll sit down, but I don't have many more to go. John Morse and the Bass Pro folks have always been a great supporter of the association and also of us individually. In March of this next year, the Wonders of the Outdoor Museum will be opening over in Springfield. It will be the largest of its kind. And I know Commissioner Baker has been there and seen it. It will be opened as the largest of its kind in the world. They're asking for help in putting some things together. The amount of aquarium space they have and the number of aquariums is just, it's pretty phenomenal. Actually, there's mounts of full-size whales. So we're talking several thousand, hundred thousands of square feet of space. But anyway, they asked Florida and Texas to put together some stuff, and I thought you'd be interested to know they specifically came to us and they said, we need a few big smallmouth, and we know Tennessee is the place to look. Can you help us get a few of those? So I didn't sign anything in paper, but I said, we'll figure out what we can do on that and get back with you. But I thought it was a compliment to you all and to the state that's where they'd be looking to find their world-class place to put some smallmouth. There was a piece of legislation that had come forth in about 4 other states, and I'm going to relate back to the CITES thing for a minute, asking the states to take up legislation to enforce its own version of the endangered species trade. It dealt primarily with ivory and some furs, bits and pieces and products that are related to endangered species that can be made from particular animals. Those were defeated in the states where they came up. It hasn't occurred in Tennessee, but I just wanted to let you know that if it does, we really need to go on point. It would be not only a huge undertaking manpower-wise, but the fiscal note that goes with that it's enormous. You have to have people at each airport, each train station, anywhere where people come in and out of, there has to be a presence so that people check all the incoming, outgoing, especially international airports. But don't see that happening right at this point in Tennessee, but wanted you to know that it is a possibility. Next week, the International Paper Company and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation are meeting in Nashville, and they've asked us to be a part of that. They're announcing the next part of a program where they have pledged several $1 million over the next 5 years to do work on the Cumberlands, and that's going to go all the way from Virginia down into North Alabama. We've already received funding from the Fish and Wildlife Service and from International Paper to do some of that. It relates to shortleaf pine restoration, some savanna work, and 2 or 3 other things that all, of course, relate to some kind of forestry activity, and specifically on our areas in the North Cumberland and the Catoosa area and going down to Bear Hollow Mountain. So we'll be participating in that. They'll be rolling out how much more money they're pledging and how they would like to see it spent in the state of Tennessee and our surrounding states. I think I can probably stop with that, but I just wanted you to know that's kind of some of the things that go on at these meetings that impact us nationally, internationally, and specifically in the state of Tennessee. And I'm proud of our people and the leadership that they're showing inside of there. And I'll leave you with this last one. Y'all remember all the problems we had with our senior citizen license and the amount of money that cost us when we couldn't go through the certification process. We have been trying for about 3 years to come up with a consensus. I'm really pleased to tell you that we finally reached a consensus with all 50 states at the meeting yesterday. And the Fish and Wildlife Service, which we've been working with in the background through this committee, has already written the rules to change those things so that going forward, I think we're going to be in a really good place in knowing what we can count. It's going to be an easier process to count them, and I don't look for us to lose any funding in the future if these go into effect, which would be July of 17, with a mandatory date of compliance of July of 18. So anyway, thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Director
Any
Carter, thank
questions?
you for your time and represent. Any questions for Ed?
I know, you mentioned the buzzards earlier. Was there any talk about cormorants?
Yes, sir, that's a part of it. Both of those are, the short version on cormorants was that there was a blanket approval from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service so that states could do cormorant work. There was a district court that struck that down, and that sent us back to page 1. So now it's having to revert back through the old process of either U.S. Department of Agriculture, Animal Control folks doing that work, or special permits through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a longer process. But what just started through the Flyway Council will address both buzzards and cormorants.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Swan?
I've
Commissioner
got
Swan?
one question. I know that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has ceased hunting of all predators on any federal lands inside Alaska. What would that do to us if they took the same position within Tennessee and other states? In other words, they're not letting them hunt bears and wolves on the U.S. controlled lands in Alaska.
That's one of the two court battles that the association has signed on to support the state of Alaska in their efforts to reverse that. And depending on which set of attorneys you're talking with will give you reasons why each side is correct. So it's going to have to go through the appeals courts, obviously, but it would make a difference in that predator control is not an allowable expense under Pittman-Robertson funding, but predator control in Alaska is more like subsistence in a lot of things because predator control relates to what the other animal populations there, especially in restoration phases, are able to increase or not increase. So the subsistence side of that is in direct conflict with the state of Alaska law. And to answer your question, we're all in agreement that unless it's a federally controlled species, that anything that goes on with inside the state should defer back to the state agency for control and for management as opposed to the federal oversight.
It's my understanding that, from what I've heard, the lawsuit that's going against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a pretty good chance of prevailing.
I would hate to call it, but it's certainly going to be interesting.
Any other questions or comments? Ed, thank you for the report. I don't think many people in this state know the national and international leadership you provide personally, as well as many of our staff for wildlife, fishery, and boating matters. You and our staff are some of the unsung heroes, sometimes unhung, we hope, but unsung heroes. And I know it takes a lot of time. I know it takes time away from home, but thank you for doing what you do. We greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We got some really good people working.
Any other comments from the commission? Commissioner Watson, you have any comments? Commissioner Woodson?
No, sir.
Let me offer a couple of quick thoughts and then we'll be done. Boyd Barker, you are giving Ron Crabtree a run for his money on consistency at these meetings, but it is great to have the Department of Ag represented here, and I understand the commissioner will be here tomorrow as well, and that's good stuff. So thank you very much for all that you do with us. Alan, you were standing up there. Did you need to say something? I want to make sure you're taken care of. Got it. The folks from the commercial fishing community, thanks for being here. I remember the first meeting that I had with you all 6 years ago, and today was fun. And I hope the relationship is reflected in how today went, because at least I believe it is. So thank you for being here. Thank you for working so hard on the relationship between your profession and the agency. I believe we have some students from UT Martin. Thanks for being here. I think sometimes it may seem a little boring. Let me assure you that Tennessee is one of the leads in this country as far as wildlife and fishery activities. Our staff are some of the best mentors you could have. So walk beside them, walk close to them, ask questions, and if there's anything they can do or we can do, we're here for you. And we're excited about you being here today, so thank you so much. Commissioner Holbert, thank you for a great day and for doing a lot of the organizing of this. And I guess we should thank your son probably more, but that's, no, really. This has been a great beginning, and we'll be saying thank you again, but I need to make sure you are recognized today. Before I let Alan speak, commissioners, you do have the conflict of interest form before you. I would like it to be a almost mandatory goal that before we leave this place tomorrow, every form will be signed and back in Danette's or Barry's hands. That's just something we can take care of very quickly. So let's get that done before the audit. Alan, the floor is yours.
Thanks to Commissioner Holbert, there's some sort of boat ride tonight. For those folks that have said they want to go on it, we will have 2 vans. Director Carter said he was really bad with the 3 R's when he was in school. I was pretty good, but over the years my arithmetic has deteriorated considerably. And I think there's supposed to be 35 or so folks signed up, and I've got 2 15-passenger vans, so that don't quite work out right. So if a couple of people could drive, we're good, but we'll have 2 vans up front at, we'll start picking people up at 5:15, get on the boat, 5:30, pick you back up off the boat at 8, and bring you back.
Alan, thank you. I understand we have plenty of John boats to carry everybody on this boating excursion, so thank you. If there's no other comments, the committee meeting of this commission day will stand adjourned. I will see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.